Starting on a full width deck board isn't luck, it's math. After 35 years of building decks, here's the process. The deck has been framed and a waterproof bladder has been installed. To be able to install the waterproof bladder, we had to commit to a size of the deck that we didn't know how that would lay out with our decking. Since we had to frame the deck fully before we could lay any decking, because sometimes we'll frame a deck, leave the joist wild, lay the decking to a certain extent, then cut the joist, put on the outside rim joist, and then we finish on a full board. That's the pro way to do it. But sometimes that's not possible. But since we were framing the deck and adding a waterproof bladder, we needed to determine the width of the deck that we were going to be using. I think these birds are pissed. Sorry guys, we're being attacked by birds. So what we did is this. We figured out the kind of decking we needed. Once we knew the type of decking we were using, we took each deck board, we added the gap we wanted in between each deck board, which was 3/16 of an inch. So the deck boards are 5.5. So we took 5 11/16 and we multiplied that by how many deck boards we needed to fill the space. Our deck was around 10 feet. We ended up with like 119.5 with gaps and decking. Knowing that we may be fat or skinny, wide or narrow when we start laying our decking, because even though we calculated 5.5 inches, odds are that these deck boards do not equate exactly to 5.5 inches every single time, even if all the decking's out of the same unit. Now that we know the width of the deck, I am gonna run a quick check just to see mathematically how close I am to where I need to be. This is a deck spacing tool called a deck divider, and it has some Irwin clamps with the deck dividers. We're able to do 5 deck boards at a time with this, plus one that's anchored, so 6 total. These have a 3/16 inch gap that we're gonna use in between the decking. So I'm gonna take an average of 6 boards and find the measurement on that and see if it calcs out to the width I need for the decking. That way I know if I need to fatten the gap or tighten the gap or leave it just as is to get me to the end of the house on a full width board. So we have our decking pretty much set up here, squared to this deck, cut, sanded, and ready to go, but none of it's installed. When I clamp this together, this is very accurate to what we need. So let's measure this. I've got 33 3/4 width. If I added an additional gap, I'd be almost at 34 inches. Let's see what that ends up on the calculator. 5 11/16, okay? So let's add that together, and I'm 34 1/8. 34 1/8 is what I need. So with this extra gap, I'm about 3/16 short of that measurement, 34 1/8. I can do one of two things. I can keep this gap like it is, which I think is what I'm gonna do to start this deck. And as we get closer to the house, I'll keep measuring to see where I am. And I wanna see if I can get to 119 7/16 is what my final gap will be. And I'm at 119 1/4. According to the math, I'm actually a little too wide, but because my actual is a little narrower than that, I'll probably be right on point. It's okay to have up to a 3/4 inch gap on the house because we're putting a 1 inch piece of trim on there and it'll be hidden. Okay, so we're on point. Yep. I have my first 5 boards ready to go. They're clamped and in place. And now I'm gonna check the distance I have from the house. We'll check each end in the center just to see where we're at mathematically. And I've got 84 5/8 down here, 85 1/8 here in the middle, and down here, 85 1/2. We have 7/8 of an inch difference from one end to the other. So that adds a whole nother concern while we're laying this deck, that this deck isn't square to the house. Because I know the far end of this deck, we had to bring it over this way so that we could have a nice straight line, because this deck projects past the corner of the house by 16 feet. So I didn't want the deck to go like this and then go like this. I had to take an average. So sometimes when you do that, one side of the deck may be narrower than the other. So I know that this side down here is tighter than this side over here. So I'm gonna keep a tight gap for now, and if I have to, I'll open up the gap a little bit later by using a different gapping tool. So how do you fix that? Well, we're gonna have to change our gaps a little bit, probably on each end. We might go to an 1/8 inch gap down here and a 1/4 inch gap down here. Just kind of depends on how the rest of the deck flows in. The main concern is we're gonna go with the average, which is the center of the deck at that 85 1/8. And I wanna see where our deck boards are gonna lay out with 85 1/8 inch residual. If I take this centerpiece and I measure this out, 33 3/4. If I take 33 3/4, double it 67 1/2, triple it is 101 1/4. So from the end of the deck, 101 1/4 gets us to here. To the house, we still have 17 5/8, we'll call it. So how do these boards lay out for 17 5/8? I'm 16 3/4 with this gap. That gives us about, again, 7/8 of an inch. So we're really pushing our luck if we keep this gap all the way to the house. It'll be really close down here, but it'll be too wide over there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and lay 3 sets of 5 boards. So we have about 16 more boards plus these that we need to get to create this space. I'm gonna lay this decking in as is, and then I'm gonna start adding a little extra gap on this end by opening up the gap just a little tiny bit, a 1/16 of an inch per deck space, so that we can kind of start racking the boards this way a little bit to take up that additional gap that we're gonna need, so we don't have a big fat gap at the edge of the house when we get to the inside of it. So we know that this end of the deck needs to be pushed closer to the house than that side does. So instead of using a 3/16 gap on a standard deck divider, we were using a 1/4 inch gap with these deckmate spacing tools. So I have all these different variable tools that we use to create different width gaps in our decking. Now, what I've done is I've increased the width of this particular section by 5/16 of an inch by just adding 1/16 to each gap. You won't really be able to tell it from once it's installed, but it's gonna make a big difference when we get to the end of the house and the board's fairly close. We're keeping our standard 3/16 gap down there, and then we're gonna run a string line through the middle, and we're gonna bring the board to the string line, pin it, and then we'll go in and we'll adjust the gap accordingly so that everything looks nice. All right, we pinned each end, and then we ran a string line to make sure that this board is straight from end to end. Now I'm gonna take my measurements again and see how we're doing as far as distance to the wall. Okay, I got 56 1/2 there. I'm 56 3/4 in the middle, so I'm only a 1/4 inch out there. And I'm almost 57 inches here. I'd say 15/16. We're within a 1/2 inch of being square. If we do what we just did one more time, we should be able to square up the decking to the house. Now that the outside board is correct and straight, you'll notice there's different width gaps through here. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take some shims and we're gonna equally space all these gaps. We could take our deck divider and that would get us close, but it may not get us perfect. So what we'll do is we'll temporarily stick this in here. Okay, and I can see right now, we don't wanna cinch this board in because it's already been straightened. So if we start pulling it in, that'll be bad. But what we wanna do is we wanna equalize our gaps. And because we have a waterproof bladder in here, we're gonna have to shorten some shims to do this. So I'm gonna bust some of these in half. So now, as I put these shims in and out, they're gonna start pushing the decking a certain way. But what it does is it equalizes the gap. So I've still got 2 large gaps here. So I'm gonna push these down, okay? And you can kind of see this one's not down as far, but as I push this down like that, this one still wants to drop. So we have a little bit bigger gap here than we do on the rest. So what I would probably do from there is grab some more of these yellow spacers and see if I can fit those in here. That's perfect. Right here, we needed a 1/4 inch gap. So we'll just kind of go through now and start gapping things the way we need to keep all the gaps equal, and then we'll chalk it off, lay it down, and then we'll repeat. All right, we have each end pinned with the gaps like the last set we did. So now I wanna see how close we are parallel to the wall and how our distance are doing. The middle of the boards are loose. They're not gapped equally. The board's not even straight yet, but I'm just trying to get an idea of where we are. I'm 28 3/8 down here, and we're 28 9/16 down there. So we've actually made up more than the gap we need on this end. So we can equal these out, lock this set down, and then our next set of boards will be done with equal gaps. Now, what size gap? We need to figure that out. So we'll take that measurement and we'll check it on some different gaps we have on the deck to decide, do we want to use a 3/16 gap or a 1/4 inch gap to get us to the wall of the house. All right guys, so here we are. We're in the final stages of installing this decking. We are down to the last 5 boards. We're cutting the last one down on the chop saw. So if I did this right, I should be able to add the gaps, secure these 4 boards, and then that last board should drop in, and I should just have a little bit of space between the deck board and the house with the final gap. So hopefully, fingers crossed, everything turned out good. It looks good to me, but let's find out if I did it right or not. With the math that we did, we're gonna finish out the last 5 boards with a 3/16 inch gap, which should give us the space we need. And we're gonna only lay 4 boards to start with and put the 5th one in last so we can kind of see where we need to put our screws for these 4 boards. We'll get all those installed and then we'll drop the last board in as the last piece to finish off our deck. All right guys, here's the final board. We've laid the deck, and I want to see how she fits. We've got her cut the length and everything, but did we do the right thing by gapping it accordingly? So let's see how we go. All right, it looks good. I'd call that success, but we still want to make sure that we can gap it right. Let's see how it looks with the gap. Look at that. So I've got about a 1/4 inch at the house. I got my 3/16 gap here, and then this trim that goes back up on the house will cover that gap. Let's go check out the other end. Well guys, it doesn't get any better than that. And just for giggles, there you go. That is a nice fit. Full width start, full width finish. Run the math first every single time.